It started long before the courtroom, long before the suit, the papers, the lawyer he hired that spoke for him louder than he ever spoke to me. It started with a tone, with offhanded comments, with moments disguised as jokes, with silence where there should have been recognition. He never said thank you. Not for the long drives to meet his family. Not for the hours I spent reviewing contracts for his startup. Not for the night I co-signed the mortgage, when he said he was too swamped to go to the bank. He said, "You're just good at that stuff." I was. I handled it. Because someone had to. Because he always had big ideas and I was always the one printing the forms, reading the clauses, signing where he pointed. At first, I told myself it was love. That dividing roles wasn't erasing effort. That just because he didn't say it out loud didn't mean he didn't notice. But eventually, the silence became a pattern. And the pattern became a narrative. When friends asked what I did, he'd say, "She keeps me sane," with a grin that made me sound like a mascot. Or worse, "She handles the boring stuff." The boring stuff was the foundation of our life. The boring stuff kept the house, paid the bills, balanced the taxes, built credit. And half of it was in my name. But in his eyes, ownership only counted if you boasted about it. He had a framed certificate from a startup that never launched. I had 3 deeds and a paper trail. He had ego. I had evidence. Still, I stayed. Because I believed in us more than I believed in fairness. Because I thought that eventually, he'd see. He'd recognize the structure I held together. He never did. Not even when it cracked. Not even when the startup failed. Not even when he looked at me across the kitchen and said, "I don't think we're working anymore." He made it sound mutual, like we both had just drifted. But then came the papers. Filed first, served cold, filed under irreconcilable differences. I was stunned, not because he wanted out, but because of what he added in the petition. She brought nothing of value to this relationship. I read that line 5 times. Then I put the papers down and laughed because suddenly I remembered every bank visit, every notarized signature, every asset I protected, every investment account I opened, every document I filed under my name. Not because I wanted control, but because he didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to deal with it. So I did. And now it was time to deal with me. It was exactly where I left it. The box, unlabeled, unassuming, slightly dented at one corner from years of being kicked, ignored, stepped over, just like me. We kept it under the bed because it saved space, more like it saved him from having to look at things he didn't want to remember. He hated paperwork, called it soul-killing, said it gave him migraines. Said he trusted me, so I kept it, sorted it, filed it, protected it. I pulled it out and sat cross-legged on the floor, the dust settling like memory. No anger, no shaking hands, just focus, just clarity. Inside were folders. I'd labeled myself simple, efficient, color-coded blue for property, green for banking, red for legal, black for the things that didn't have a place yet, like us. The mortgage papers were there, signed by both of us. But the deed, the actual title, was in my name. Why? Because his credit was weak at the time. He'd asked me to front the purchase just for now. Said he'd refinance later. He never did. Next was the condo downtown. He told everyone he bought it. But I remembered the closing appointment he skipped because of a pitch meeting. I remembered the check, the wire transfer, the signature on the loan mine. It was in my name too. Then the little house by the lake, his escape spot, his retreat, the one he brought friends to when he needed to clear his mind. That one. He convinced me to use a portion of my inheritance to secure the down payment. I did. Silently he promised to make it. Up he never did, and he never realized whose name the deed was under. Mine. 3 properties, all in my name. Not out of strategy, out of necessity, because he always had a reason not to sign, and I always had a reason to protect us, even if I was the only one trying. I sat there for hours, not sad, not satisfied, just stunned, because everything he said I never brought was right here, and it was mine. I could feel the courtroom already. His lawyer smug, his smile rehearsed, his version of events, carefully worded. She didn't contribute financially. She supported his vision. She was just there, that's what they'd say, just there. But paper doesn't lie. Titles don't forget. Documents don't flinch when asked who they belong to. I placed the folders into a clean briefcase, not the leather one he bought for appearances, the one I bought at an office supply store. Quiet and sturdy. I organized them by type, labeled everything again, because the truth deserves order, and then I placed the marriage certificate on top. It looked so small now, so temporary, so light, compared to everything else. He wore the navy suit, the one he saved for investor meetings, polished shoes, hair combed with military precision, expressions set like a statue. He looked every bit the part of the man he told the world he was, until he opened his mouth. The courtroom was quiet. No jury, no spectators, just the judge, 2 attorneys, and a silence too big for 4 walls. I sat to the left.com/prepared. Ignored. His lawyer started first. Your Honor, the petitioner would like to make clear that this is a no-fault dissolution. However, financial records will show an imbalance in contributions. Imbalance. Interesting choice of word. The judge looked up. Older man. Tired eyes, patient, not impressed. He asked, "Is this about asset division?" His lawyer nodded. Double quotes. "We believe the respondent brought no significant financial or material assets to the relationship." He glanced toward me, not in cruelty, but calculation, as if daring me to argue. Then he spoke. She was supportive emotionally, but she didn't bring in income. She didn't handle the finances. I covered most of the major investments. Covered that word echoed, because I remembered the checks, the receipts, the weekends I spent calculating interest and arranging tax deductions while he took mental space. The judge asked, "Can you provide documentation of your financial contributions, Mr. Lewis?" He blinked, then turned to his lawyer, then said, "Well, not everything was in my name. We shared a lot informally." Informally. Another word that doesn't hold up in court? The judge turned to me. Double quotes. Ms. Hartley, do you have anything to present? I nodded once, opened my briefcase. No drama, no commentary, just evidence. I laid the first file flat, the deed to the primary residence, signed and notarized, in my name. Next, the second property, then the third bank accounts I managed. Tax filings, I submitted. Loan approvals I secured with my credit score. Every document carried a date. Every signature was mine. The judge scanned the first few pages. He didn't raise his eyebrows, didn't smirk, but his silence shifted, solidified. Something changed. A weight moved from me to him. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Lewis, it appears most real estate assets were legally acquired under the respondent's name. Were you aware?" He stammered. For the first time in years, he stammered. "Well, I mean, yes, but it was a matter of efficiency. I thought it was." Understood. Another assumption. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just sat still as his lawyer leaned in, whispering something frantic. And he began flipping papers he hadn't read in months. The judge said, "It seems your financial claim lacks sufficient evidence. Unless you can provide documentation to counterbalance the deeds presented, I'll proceed with the proposed division." I handed over one final sheet, a letter from the bank, confirming mortgage payments, all from an account in my name, every month, for 5 years, without a single contribution from his side. There was nothing left to say, so he said it anyway. "I didn't realize. I assumed we were building it together." For once, I spoke, quietly, calmly, directly to the judge. We weren't building. I was covering the cracks. He used to say, "Just tell me where to sign," and I did. Every time. He said it like it was an act of trust, a sweet gesture, proof that he believed in me. But the truth, he just didn't care. Not about the documents, not about the details, not about the foundation we were building, only the shine it gave him. I was the one who read the clauses, who asked about penalties and terms, who stayed on hold with the insurance company, while he walked out for coffee and came back with a smile like nothing required his time. He forgot what he signed because he never read it, but I remembered. I remembered everything. The joint account that was never really joint, because I was the only one depositing into it. The emergency fund we opened together, that I funded with freelance work he called just a hobby. The legal paperwork that allowed me to act as his proxy, signed by him in a rush, right before a flight, without reading a word. And the prenuptial agreement. Oh, that one. He forgot it even existed. We signed it before buying the first house. A lawyer suggested it. He said it was just paperwork, that it wouldn't matter, that we'd never need it anyway. So I added a clause. One sentence. Clear, legal, unmistakable. Any asset purchased under sole ownership remains separate. In the event of divorce. He signed it with a joke. You planning to run off with a secret fortune? I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't think I'd ever have to use it. He forgot he signed that clause. And now, the judge had it. Highlighted. Page 3. No ambiguity. No gray area. In the court summary, they called it binding. In his expression, I saw panic. Not anger, not yet confusion. As if the ground beneath him was made of paper and he had just realized he never learned to read. He looked at me once during recess, eyes searching for sympathy, for softness. I offered none. Because I had offered it for years and he never recognized it as a gift. I thought about all the times I kept records out of instinct, not out of spite. Just because I didn't like being lost in fog. He used to tease me for it. You keep receipts like the FBI. I did because one day, I knew I might need to remember what he tried to forget. I kept the emails, the bank letters, the tax filings, the little notebook where I listed all the shared expenses and all the times he said, "I'll pay you back later." He never did. But now, the balance was due. The room was cold, lit by fluorescence that made everything feel too sharp, too clinical, but for the first time, I wasn't shrinking under it. I was still focused. Solid. His lawyer shuffled papers like they were suddenly too heavy. The judge reread lines without emotion. My folder sat closed beside me. There was nothing left to prove. He sat differently now. Shoulders not as square. Legs no longer crossed in confidence. Jaw tight, but not defiant. The silence wasn't awkward. It was final. The judge's voice was calm, almost tired. Given the documentation provided and the legal agreement signed by both parties, the court recognizes the respondent's sole ownership of the assets in question. No gasp, no reaction, just words. But they landed like thunder inside me. I didn't look at him, there was nothing to see. Whatever story he had crafted, the one where I was just along for the ride, had crumbled on paper. I thought it would feel like triumph. It didn't. It felt like release, like letting go of a weight I didn't realize I had been carrying in my bones. His lawyer asked for recess. The judge granted it. He stood slowly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Can we talk?" I shook my head, not out of anger, out of clarity. Because nothing he could say would undo the years of minimizing, of pretending, of dismissing. In the hallway, I passed two women waiting outside. One of them looked at me, then at the file in my hand. "You won?" she asked, half whisper. I paused. I remembered everything. That was my answer, not revenge, not power. Memory. That's what saved me. Later, when the ruling was printed and handed over, I didn't read it again. I already knew what it said, and I didn't need paper to validate what I had always known in private. I wasn't the one who brought nothing. I was the one who brought everything, and he was just too distracted to notice. He'd been living in a house built with my name. He walked out first. Of course he did. He needed the exit. He needed the air. He needed to move fast enough that people would see momentum instead of defeat. I followed later, not slowly, deliberately, because I didn't need to flee. There was nothing chasing me anymore. The courthouse steps felt steeper. Then I remembered. But the sky was clearer, and for the first time in months, I wasn't calculating anything. Not my tone, not my next move, not how to protect him from the consequences of his own arrogance. I held the envelope in my hand, final ruling, stamped, sealed, inside it. Words that returned to me what had always been mine, but it wasn't the envelope I kept staring at, it was the keys in my pocket. Cold, real, silent. The kind of silence that feels like ownership, not absence. He would tell the story differently. I knew that he would say I blindsided him, that I played the long game, that I was ruthless in court. And some would believe him, because that's the thing about storytelling. Volume often drowns out truth, but I wouldn't correct him. I didn't need to. I didn't need them to understand. I needed me to remember. I went home to a house in my name. With walls I had paid for. With doors I had opened. I didn't change the locks. I didn't burn old photographs. I didn't make space for rage. I opened the windows, let the air in. Cleaned surfaces that had collected dust and memories. I lit a candle, not for ritual, but for comfort. And I stood in the middle of the living room, the place he used to call ours, and said nothing. Because it was finally mine. I didn't feel victorious. I felt awake. There's no glory in proving someone wrong when they were never trying to be right. But there is peace in reclaiming what was always yours. He left with his version of things, polished. Spoken with a smile, built for sympathy. Let him have it. Let him carry it like a trophy made of air. I left with the keys. To every house, to every account, to every door I once opened quietly, while he took calls in the next room about his next big thing. The only thing I ever wanted was to be seen. Now I see myself clearly, fully, and in the light he always kept me from standing in.